Welcome, everyone. This is an Arcola Bible Church podcast, and I'm your host, Mark Kelpscoff. That hymn was written towards the end of Benjamin Mansell Ramsey's life in 1920. He died 3 years later. He was an English organist and an amateur composer. He wrote thousands of hymns, apparently. Who is teaching your children the way? And what way are they teaching them? For most parents, it will be the public school system, and the way may well be quite destructive. Today, we're talking with a Loudoun County school teacher, and our subject is what the teachers are currently required to be trained in and teach. But first, here's the verse for the day, read by Ashish Mupidi.
Psalm 27:11. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they breathe out violence.
Thank you, Ash. Today I'm talking with Monica Gill. It is Gill, right, Monica? I have to remember to say Gill because I'm married to a Jill, and it's spelt the same way. So,
Yes.
Anyway, you're a Loudoun County public school teacher. Today we're going to talk about a subject that directly impacts your work and our kids. So by little sort of preamble here, this whole subject of race and injustice and inequality, and I know we both believe in a God that sees all, races equally, and a Bible that offers us a sort of a solution to live in harmony. But it seems like not just Loudoun County schools, but also where I am in Fairfax County, have appear to have adopted a totally different worldview based on this critical race theory. So that's what we're here to discuss. But Monica, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Well, I'm number one, a Jesus lover and follower. I am a wife to a wonderful husband for 22 years, Doug. We have a beautiful daughter who is just a joy to us. Her name is Grace. She is about to be 13, which I can hardly believe. But my mission field is, aside from my family, my mission field is the schools. And I've been a teacher for 26 years in high school. I have taught almost everything that you could teach in social studies, but primarily specializing in U.S. history and government, teaching it at all levels from college level to basic level. So That's who I am.
All right. Well, cool. So I was reading an article and that you had written in the Federalist, and it was about equity training provided by Loudoun County Schools. Tell us, what is this equity training?
Well, if you were to kind of wrap it up in a little package, I would say the equity training really is taking this lens of critical race theory, and it is essentially imposing it as a means by which educators and students are being taught how to view the world and view one another, viewing one another based in these categories as oppressed and oppressor, essentially based on your outward appearance. And the interesting thing is that in the trainings, they continue to say that we're having a conversation, and they continue to say that they are not trying to push a particular ideology, that they don't want us to do sweeping generalizations about other people because of their race. And yet the training itself is guilty of the very harm that it's saying it's trying to remedy. Right. For instance, I had written in that article about how one of the trainings that I went to was really focused in on this whole construct of white privilege, which in reality is basically a racial stereotype. And, being in that equity training and watching many of my colleagues be very disturbed by it. Some of them, I had one of my good friends next to me literally in tears because the things that they were talking about and showing, she said, this is completely denying my situation as a single white mom who had to live on welfare and had to have free lunch for my children for several years while they were in school. So that entire construct of white privilege being pressed as a lens by which teachers are supposed to view each other, is supposed to view kids are supposed to view each other, really is itself a racial stereotype. I mean, what is the definition of a racial stereotype? It is taking one characteristic and applying it to an entire group of people. And then how can you take this characteristic of privilege, say that applies to every white person, and then say that's not a racial stereotype, that it's not race itself? So that's just one example of what I saw in the training. My most recent training was all about microaggressions, and we were taught that claiming colorblindness is a microaggression and a racist claim itself, which is just completely, as a Christian, that's like the antithesis of what Christianity is about. You're taught that, you know, the human beings on the earth, there's one race, the human race, and that we are supposed to love God and love one another and not view each other based on our outward identities of race or gender or ethnicity. And it just is completely contrary to what King taught us, right? He was teaching us to he was advocating for a colorblind society. And so it just kind of flabbergasts me that we're rolling back 60 years of progress from arguably the most, you know, successful civil rights movement in history. It's heartbreaking to see it happen.
So yeah, this teaching, this is provided for this is for teachers, and is it like compulsory? Is it sort of like, hey, everyone it is?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, you are not allowed to be absent from it. It is a required training for everyone.
It's required training. And what's the title of this training?
We actually have training at two different levels. One is from the division itself, and then the other is kind of at each school. The principal and the equity team or equity lead gets a little bit of leeway in terms of how they're going to run things month to month. But we have some sort of training every month, either directly from our school or from the division. So the division calls it Equity in the Center. So our first was called Equity in the Center 1. Our second one was called Equity in the Center 2. Some of it was delayed because of COVID. And it is interesting to talk to my colleagues at other schools to see the degree to which they are kind of embracing the ideology, whether it's really extreme radical or just sort of trying to walk a fine line. And there are other schools where it really has been very extreme. They have been, for instance, at one school, they had to, as a staff, read Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped. That was required of that particular staff. So it also depends on the school, what exactly is happening. But the disturbing things are definitely coming from the division level, where it is definitely pushing all of the things that are part of critical race theory. And they continue to say, we're not teaching critical race theory. But what they are doing is they're taking all of the ideas from critical race theory and they're imposing that as a way by which we're supposed to be looking at the world and teaching our content. So they're pulling together all of those things like white privilege, white dominant society, systemic racism, microaggressions. Those are all things that we're learning about and being taught that these are realities. These assumptions are being taught as realities.
Right. There's no dispute about it's this is the truth. Here, take it. It seems like they don't like to sort of publicly admit they're teaching critical race theory. It seems like they're trying to sort of like say, teach critical race theory, but call it something else. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they know that the whole idea of critical race theory itself has its roots in Marxism, and that's a red flag for Americans who are, liberty-loving, freedom-loving, and know that communism is the complete antithesis of what America is all about. So they want to try and divorce themselves from this radical ideology as much as they can. But the reality is that it's exactly what they are doing and imposing. I mean, they can say all they want. Oh, we're not teaching critical race theory. That's a niche part of, academic law for elite law schools. Well, the average American does not need to be reading the eloquent theories of critical race theory at the academic level in order for those ideas to be pared down to consumable form for the average person to gobble up and have it trickle down is, a negative thing in our society. If you think about every communist revolution in history, Russia, China, Cuba, Vietnam, the revolutionary elites didn't run through the streets reading the eloquent ideas of Marx from the Communist Manifesto. Yeah. They appealed to the people, right, with an emotional appeal. You are oppressed. These are your oppressors. Go get them, destroy them, and destroy the system.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what is happening in our schools right now. Our children are being used as pawns for this indoctrination and being taught to view each other as oppressed and oppressor through new racial stereotypes that they're creating. And it's just not a healthy environment.
Sometimes it's hard to comprehend how those in authority fall into these subversive and harmful policies. It's almost like there's some hidden destructive force behind the scenes. Oh, wait, there actually is. Well, we're going to hear more from Monica in the next podcast. Please come back and listen to part 2 and 3. Thanks for listening today. And remember, greater is He within you than he that is in the world.